Hello there, everyone. I'm Stephen Jones. I'm an actor and a playwright from Tala.
Yeah, so this is take two. I had a bit of brilliant interview in the bag yesterday, and then I realised it was all corrupted. So yeah, so hopefully this will work.
Yeah, it was an hour of me waffling corrupted your.
No, we weren't waffling. So if you see the jump cuts here, you know what I'm editing. So come here. Yeah, take us back to that young lad in Tala and kind of where it was. How did you get into it, Stephen? Like, was it kind of something that was there all the time, or was it something that kind of grew in you?
No, I think it developed over the years. I was growing up. I had kind of three really close mates. We all grew up in the same estate in Tala, and all we did was play football. We were all mad into it, and we all played at a decent level. Two of my mates went on to be professional footballers in England, and that's all we did. And so we didn't hang around corners drinking or smoking or doing anything like that. It was literally just playing football 24/7. And it was only when I kind of got into my teens that the interest I had in writing more so than acting. I never did any drama classes or anything like that. Started to kind of develop a little bit more, and all really sparked, I suppose, when I joined a creative writing class up in Tala Library. And it was because there was a guy in my school, a guy called Neil Richardson, who has gone on to write a lot of non-fiction books about the army and war and stuff like that. And I was sitting beside him in history class one day. We were chatting away about it, and he was telling me that he was involved in this group. And I asked, "Oh, can I come up?" And so I did. And I met the guys who ran the group were two writers, Larry O'Loughlin and Caroline Barry. And yeah, we would just meet once a week, and I was writing short stories, and I was reading a lot of Stephen King. So all the stories were kind of like little American horror stories with twists and turns and all that kind of stuff. But looking back on it, then when I was a teenager as well, other mates I had in school, we used to make little silly little short videos and little home movies, and it was all MTV Jackass at the time, so we'd be doing our own stunts, or we were all mad into professional wrestling, so we'd be throwing ourselves around, some back garden. But doing the voices and doing the interviews and all that kind of stuff, and so yeah, and I was always doing voices or impressions. So you can trace all these things back. That there was definitely a part of me that was interested. I just didn't have any formal introduction to it until much later.
Yeah, and come here, football was a big thing. Like it was taken very seriously by you, was it?
Well, when I was 12, 13, 14, that guy was playing for a club called Stella Maris, who were quite big at the time, and it was all about trying to get trials to go to England and the usual story. And yeah, so yeah, that was the dream for a while. And then when it doesn't happen, when you're like 15, 16 and you're not going to England, and you're watching your mate go to England to go to Leeds and stuff, you're kind of, yeah, that dream kind of dies. And I stopped playing football for a couple of years, and then went back to it for a bit as when I was 18, 19, and played a little bit of Leinster Senior as an adult. And but then with acting and stuff kept getting in the way, so I had to give it up. But I still play a bit of five-a-side or seven-a-side now. We actually have an actors group that was started, and it's called Bend It Like Beckett. And people we play most weeks. So yeah, and I'm a massive fan as well. So it's a big part of my life. But it's just funny to think that was, when I was a kid, that's all I wanted to be, was a footballer, really. But,
yeah. And then come here, when you started to join the creative writing group, did you was that an immediate thing for you? Kind of, this is kind of, yeah, interesting.
Well, I think I probably had a bit of a flair for it since I was a kid. I was always, and even in English class and stuff, we were doing essays. My essays or stories would be creative. And even going back to being a fan of pro wrestling as a kid, I would have all the little figures, and I would be playing with them as a kid, but I would have scripts written, that would be my own storylines as opposed to the ones that were on TV and stuff like that. And so my mom would always say that to me, if I was ever down or anything like that as a kid, why don't you play one of your games? Because she recognized, I suppose, that I was quite good at going into my own imagination and finding joy in that.
Yeah.
So I definitely always had a creative side, but it was more the writing. I always had these great ambitions. I always wanted to write a novel as as a teenager because, you know, like S.E. Hinton had written The Outsiders and Rumblefish as a teenager, something like that, you know. And I'd always start these stories or whatever, and they never go anywhere. But when I was 16, 17 in this creative writing group, some of the stories weren't bad, you know, for the time, but they were heavily influenced by whatever I was reading at the time, you know.
I come here with the acting. Was acting in the frame then at all? Like, when did that happen for you?
As I said, messing around with video cameras at home and doing voices and messing around, and so yeah, I was probably comfortable with it. But no, I never did any acting classes, anything like that. What happened was, in that writing group, I was about to do my leaving cert, and my plan was to go to UCD to do English and history, which I did do. And the writer who ran the group, Larry O'Loughlin, said to me, "Oh, you're going to UCD? Yeah. Well, you should join the Drama Society." And I said, "I don't do any acting." He said, "Oh no, well, you said you know you could be good at it." But also, his daughter had been in UCD and was a writer and joined Dramsoc and had put a few plays on. And I never thought about writing a play. Well, anyway, when I went to UCD, I joined Dramsoc in the Freshers Week, and I didn't actually go down there for a few months, but then I ended up seeing a poster for auditions for 12 Angry Men, and I loved that movie, and I thought, I can do an American accent, this would be a bit of crack. And yeah, I suppose there was obviously there must have been a secret desire to try it, but anyway, I auditioned and got the lead role of the juror number 8, who, you know, as the guy says, not guilty at the start. But I look back on that, and it's like, out of the 12 guys, 6 or 7 of us are still actors, you know. Ronan Raftery, Killian Scott, 2 of the lads from Foil Arms and Hog, you know, other people. So it's just crazy. So once I did that, I was hooked, and I spent more time in the 4 years I was in college, spent more time in UCD Dramsoc than I did in lectures, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's a common problem.
Yeah.
People in Dramsoc. Go back to me kind of back to school, and kind of you mentioned films there. Were movies a big thing for you?
Not really at an early stage. Like, you know, it was like any person who likes a good movie, but I wasn't like kind of cinephile, kind of obsessed with movies as I am now. I suppose as well, I had an English teacher for leaving cert, so 4th year, 5th year, 6th year, a guy called Pacelli O'Rourke. Unusual name for an Irish guy, but he was an actor, and he was quite well regarded on the amateur scene. I think he was with a group called Sundrive Players, and he'd go to the All Ireland and blah blah blah. And we got these amazing texts, because we usually have 3 texts for leaving cert, and we had our Shakespeare was Macbeth, and then we had our play was A View from the Bridge by Arthur Miller, and then our film was On the Waterfront.
Yeah, wow.
You know, but the thing was, when we were reading Macbeth, he'd give it gusto. If we were doing A View from the Bridge, you know, he'd be doing it in the New York accent, and then he'd be picking on us, going, you know, Stephen Jones, you can do a few accents, you know, and stuff like that. And actually, the thing was, I had done a small part in a musical in school in Oliver, and you know, I thought I should have been the Artful Dodger. I think I was robbed, but because they did musicals, I wasn't really into musicals, so I never went back and did any more. But he knew that I could do it, so he would always pick on me to kind of read opposite him and stuff like that, and a few others, and yeah, just great. Like On the Waterfront, watching Brando for the first time, and our teacher taking an interest, and he would stop it, and he'd be telling you why the famous contender scene in the back of the cab between the 2 brothers is so famous and iconic, and so he made it more than just a black and white movie for a bunch of school kids, you know. And then I just got kind of obsessed. I must have watched On the Waterfront 20 times that year, and that's when the kind of romantic notions sort of crept in, I suppose. I'd be reciting that scene off by heart, or I'd be walking home, and I started watching old Oscar-winning speeches, and I think a little bit of that romanticism has been knocked down me in terms of, you know, awards and films and, you know, celebrity and everything else. But so I started to develop a real kind of passion, and that's when you go and do the classic thing of you go and watch all of Brando's films, and you find out about that style of acting, and then, you know, how he influenced De Niro and Pacino, and you start watching the films of Scorsese and everyone else, and so that was all around the same time. And then when I went to college, I started to be introduced to plays, you know, like you'd be reading Waiting for Godot for the first time because the lads had a production on last year in Dramsock, it was brilliant, or Harold Pinter or whoever it may be, that, and so yeah, it was just this whole new world opened up for me in a short space of time.
I think this is fascinating. Actually, we did one of these with the rapper Maverick Sabre, and he was talking about he used to go, brilliant way of phrasing it. Like, I can't remember the artist who was listening to, but he kind of, when he met him, then when he kind of got a career himself, he kind of couldn't talk to him. He was he just said didn't get starstruck. He got starstruck with this guy because he used to listen to him on his kind of, on his headphones and his iPod coming from school. He used to go for walks with this guy, and this guy has such a massive influence on him. Yeah. And then when he met him, he kind of went, it wasn't because of his stardom, it was because nearly the embarrassment of having had him on the walk to school with him in his ears. So I think that sense of that romantic, entering into a whole new world of Brando. But then talk to me, Stephen, about kind of Dramsock and then kind of, beginning to act and, that, because there must be something in you that kind of made you do Oliver in the first place in school that kind of was there.
I think I was probably a bit of a show off. Like, I think I'm generally quite extrovert kind of person. So yeah, I also think there's a competitive nature in me. I just thought something came up and they want someone to do it. I always want to throw myself into something. So there's probably a bit of that. But yeah, it's funny actually. You say about the thing. There's two things. There was the Pacelli O'Rourke thing was interesting because I was doing a play that I had written in Dramsock, and Peter Coonan, who's a well-known actor now, he was the lead role in my play, and we were talking about all this kind of stuff and movies and plays and getting into it. And Peter's mom had been an actress, and she passed away when he was quite young, in his early teens, and we were talking about that, and we were talking about English teachers and everything mixed up. And I said I had an English teacher who was an actor called Pacelli O'Rourke, and Peter went, Pacelli O'Rourke? He said, yeah. He said, well, Pacelli O'Rourke and my mum played Captain Boyle and Juno in a production of Playboy in the amateur drama group that he saw years before. And so just weird coincidences. Like, and in that play, I was using, like, when the audience came in, I was using Damien Dempsey song, two of Damien Dempsey's songs, Factories and Spray Paint Back Alley, because the play was about a group of 12-year-old kids. And I was listening to Damien Dempsey's music a lot right in that particular play. And then Mark O'Connor, the filmmaker, came to see my play, to see Peter Coonan, because he was a friend of a friend, and he had this movie he wanted to do. So I wiggled my way into it as well. And we went out and shot a few days for free. The film board decided to give Mark $100,000 to make the movie. And then Mark rings me to say, I really want to use Damien Dempsey's music, but I actually want to have him in the film as well. And you're a good talker, so will you come with me to meet him in, I think, some hotel in town? What's the God, I'm gone blank. What's the really famous hotel in the middle of Grafton Street, just off Grafton Street?
Gresham. Oh, Grafton Street. Sorry, Shelburne. No. Oh, sorry. Now you have me going blank. Go on. I gotta come to you.
Yeah, you know the one I'm talking about. Yeah. Up from the Phil Lynott statue.
The Westbury.
Westbury, yeah, in there, and that was the same thing. I was kind of going, I was real nervous talking to Damien Dempsey just because, I'd spent the year before listening to, getting introduced to his music and finding a big influence on what I was putting down on paper,
Yeah.
And that became Between the Canals, which was went on to be a good jumping off point for us, loads of us in it.
Stephen, just in relation to that though, I mean, that must have been really exciting when you're still in college, kind of, getting an opportunity like that.
Yeah, well, that was just as I was coming out of college, so obviously a lot went on before that, just kind of doing a load of plays, doing plays just that you'd never get a chance to do professionally, maybe, like loads of big stuff, like Beth, and I played Iago, and did Streetcar, and did Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, like mad stuff. Wow. But yeah, we used to do this thing where there'd be 2 shows a week, a lunchtime and an evening show in Dramsock. And the more I was making friends and getting into it and becoming more involved, I said, I had this short story that had been published in a little collection with the Creative Writing Group out in Tallaght. And I said, I made this adaptation of it for the stage, and we put it on at lunchtime. And like, looking back on it, like it was probably rubbish, but it was, it was just cool to be able to take something that you'd written and then you put it on, and you have all these actors and they're saying the words, and it was just really a really cool time. And then something really important happened, I think, in my career that going forward, which I look back on now and think, yeah, that was a big moment. Was I was still writing, like I was 19 writing this play about an American office worker, and him and his wife are going through struggles because, you know, they can't have children and all, like crazy stuff. Everyone was using American accents. It was mad. But I ended up reading True West by Sam Shepard, and about a week later reading Howie the Rookie by Marco Rowe. And it's because I had heard about it on the DVD extras of Intermission, this movie. And so I went and bought Howie the Rookie. And it was like, what if it was a Marcus from Tala like me? And I was just like, okay, what if it was like, what if the play was True West, but it was spoken like they speak in Howie the Rookie? And I ended up doing this like a little experiment for myself where I took the two brothers in True West in the first scene and I just rewrote it with Dublin kind of vernacular. And in the seed of that experiment, I ended up coming up with a play about two brothers that called A Certain Romance. And we put it on in Dramsoc, and it was really well received, and went on to represent UCD at the Irish Student Drama Awards and stuff. But someone was telling me, send it to all the theatres, you send the script to all these theatres. And so I sent it to everybody, and I still have loads of rejection slips, and I got a really long letter from the Bush in London saying why they liked it, and, you know, they're not going to produce it, but maybe, you know, blah, 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 all this advice. But Thomas Conway, who was the literary manager at Druid at the time, rang me, and he was like, you know, who are you? And would you like to come and be part of the Galway Arts Festival and part of the Druid debut series? And I was like, yeah, you know, and I sort of didn't realize how big a company Druid were and how important it would be. And so anyway, long story short, you know, I'm 21 or 22 and I'm down in Galway, and Michael Murphy is directing a reading of my play, and Gary Hines is sitting beside me going, yeah, did you enjoy this? I said, yeah. And the now Mick Lally Theatre, you know, was packed, and Ronan Leahy and Brian Gleeson were reading the play, and just getting 2 or 3 days of feedback and working it. And I'm just sitting there going, you know, but it was great. And it's mad stuff. Like Michael Murphy would be going, yeah, Stephen, fucking, yeah, it's great. But like, what's all this Oscar Wilde shit? And I'd be like, what? And we figured out what it was. I was like, Oscar Wilde, you know? It was a Damien Dempsey lyric. One of the characters was drunk and he was singing, we are all in the gutter. And I was going, oh, it's just a Damien Dempsey song, you know, not even knowing it was an Oscar Wilde quote. So all these things were, you know, and yeah, so it was just, again, that's just always these little steps and inspiring confidence that you can go on and actually do it. And a lot of my friends in Dramsoc who were a year above me, they started, when they got to their final year, were applying for drama school, and some of them went off to RADA and LAMDA, and it was just that thing of going, okay, I didn't know you could actually try and do this as a job, you know.
And
yeah.
What was it then, sort of, you know, after that amazing experience then in the Druid debut series and kind of that, you know, the acting and the writing bubbling in you, what were the next steps for you? Like, how did it happen for you? You know, when did you decide, okay, I'm going to do this as a career?
Yeah, well, I applied to get into drama school and in London, and no dice, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, you know. I don't know whether my heart was really in it, and I don't know how prepared I went over, because it would have been a lot of money, and yeah, I don't know. Look, I was going to go back the following year because I got to the final round of a couple of big schools, and what I decided to do was, I was very lucky in that I got a grant to do a master's in UCD in creative writing. And it was only 8 hours of class time, and the final thesis was, you know, like, some people wrote a novel, some had a collection of poetry, whatever it was, but mine was going to be 2 plays with an introduction and how they're connected. But the plays had already been written and performed, and they had both won Irish Student Drama Awards and one had been a Druid debut. So I was fairly confident that as a thesis of creative work, the 2 plays would be kind of, you know, enough to get me a decent mark. So I was sort of like, I'm getting a grant, I can have this qualification, I get to have another year in UCD doing plays and writing plays and preparing for drama school auditions. So I looked at it as a free year before I had to go out into the world.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was really good. And but before drama school came up, that stuff like Between the Canals came up, and we went to film that. And then from there, it was like that Between the Canals got a small cinema release and stuff like that. And me and Peter Kuhn and a few others were invited down to audition for Love Hate season 2 with Maureen Hughes. And around that time, the Factory Actor Studio was just starting up, and it was before it became now moved to Bow Street and an acting school. It was invitation only. It was sort of based on the New York model of getting, young actors down and mingling with directors and just coming up with ideas and filming stuff and workshops. So yeah, I got a small part in Love Hate. I remember the time me and Peter didn't have an agent, and we both auditioned and had callback for the part of Fran, and we were ringing each other. Any news? Any news? I remember he rang me. It was like he was giving me the worst news ever, and I was like, "Oh, it's fair enough." So yeah, and through that, then I ended up, getting hooked up with an agent, and the Factory kind of took off. Met a lot of people, was encouraged to keep writing, and but really, I was around that time. I just started doing a lot of plays. I mean, I met a guy in UCD. We were doing Othello, and I was playing Iago. And every year in UCD, they do a big Shakespeare, and they'd move the venue to a 600-seater and get schools in, and they would bring an outside director in and, give them a few quid or whatever. I actually ended up going back a few years later and directing Gavin Dre and Hamlet, and Ian Toner was in it, and Katrina Ennis, and all these amazing actors. And so Seamus Moran came in to direct, and he cast me as Iago, and we had auditioned everyone in UCD Drama Stock, everyone in UCD who wanted to be in this show, and we just didn't have an Othello, and we were trying to think of ideas of what we were going to do. And the 11th hour, down the stairs bounds this guy Kunle, 6'4", from Nigeria, and he's looking around, and we're going, "Oh, please let him be looking for the auditions." And that he came over, heavily accented as well. And he was like, "Is this the auditions for Othello?" And we were like, "Yeah." Like, "Who are you?" Like, and it turned out like he was a man. He was in his 30s, but he was doing a master's. He was a mature student doing a master's in something in the arts, and he thought this would be a good thing to have on his kind of year of doing this, of being in college or whatever. And so yeah, he ended up being Othello, and we got on very well. And he rang me, and as soon as my first job outside of college was in Project Cube with an African company, his company, Camino de la Rula, and we did a South African play that was usually for 2 black actors, but he took it from apartheid South Africa and placed it in modern day Dublin, and split. There's 2 parts that usually the same actor plays, but he split it for 2 actors. So the script wasn't changed at all. I was still a character called Buntu, but I was now a white Irish Dubliner in this story. And there was so yeah, I think I'm the only ever white actor to be in that play. It's quite a famous play. Sizwe Banzi is dead, and there was these African singers and dancers also who made up the chorus, along with there was a guy called Yomi, who was an African actor, and a guy called Michael Yare, who was from Tala, but with Nigerian parents. So we sounded the same, but obviously looked different. So it was a really interesting look, years and years ago, about Dublin and race and immigration, and this was before I knew professional actors or knew the significance of the project or the art scene or what was going on in Dublin. And someone saw me in that and gave me a part in the new theatre in a play, and that was the thing. I was whatever I was doing at the time was the thing. I wasn't worried about what was going on in the big houses or anything like that. So I was just doing play after play, profit share, little or no money, working in a call centre that I'd had a job since I was in college, ringing in sick when I needed, and like the worst acting I've ever done. Yeah, I needed sick. To get hours off to do plays or do rehearsals, and so a mad time of just.
And was that hard to be able to? I mean, that's a really good attitude to have? Is that something that came natural to you, like just kind of focusing on what you were doing, rather than kind of having this, you know, constant letdowns? Do you know what I mean? That it kind of it's more about kind of what you're doing, what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I think I didn't really look at. I always I still thought that to act on the Abbey stage or something like that was almost, I'll get there one day, but in the future it was almost so unattainable in my mind at the time that I wasn't focused on it. And I try my best to maintain that attitude, and it is very hard like that. That whatever you're doing is the thing, not to be looking forward all the time, to concentrate on what you're doing and to appreciate what you're doing, because like when even like it's going to be approaching in the next couple of months, like it'll be the longest I've never been on stage since I started acting in 2004, because I love it. But sometimes you're just doing it, and it's your job. You can sort of lose that almost innocence and that romantic appeal that you had when you were starting out, where just doing the play, getting in front of an audience, that was enough, where you didn't have to worry so much about, how many people are in tonight, or, who's going to see this, or are we going to get good reviews, or what's this going to lead to? So, it's a fine balance, because you move on and whatever. But it's that time I remember fondly just about learning and soaking up things and trying to be better in each play I did, and combining that time down the factory and meeting people and starting to get one or two little auditions for film or TV things, and and just meeting like-minded people and sort of getting to know more people as well, like getting to know other actors from different generations, and becoming friendly with people. And
was there moments around that? I mean, because you're kind of balancing there, TV, film, the beginning of a stage career. Was there moments for you that you kind of, now looking back in hindsight, kind of, to kind of go, oh geez, that was a moment in my stage career that kind of meant something more, or was kind of a trigger point for something else?
Yeah, well, we did remember doing Danny and Chantel Still Here by Philip McMahon, and it was really good timing, because Tracy Martin was directing it, and Philly had Alice in Funderland opening on the main stage of the Abbey around the same time. So me and Eva Jane Gaffney, who were great pals, were doing Danny and Chantel. Philly was really interested. He'd come in and pop his head into the kind of final rehearsals, and he'd be just, one or two little suggestions, but he was really happy with it. And because he was actually sending people to see it, because he had something on the main stage of the Abbey, and at the same time he had like his first play on the dance floor of Riros downstairs in the round. And what happened then was, it was by chance we were invited to do a little segment of the play in the Peacock at work, the This Is Pop Baby night. And Annie Ryan of Corn Exchange fame was like, oh, who's that guy? And my brand new agent at the time, Thurza Ging, who's now back in casting, was like, oh, he's a client of mine. What do you want him for? You can, yeah, But anyway, that led to an audition for Dubliners, and which I ended up getting the part. And that was a Dublin Theatre Festival, on the Gaiety for the first time, with the Corn Exchange, with, Dervla Crotty and Mark Lambert and, Mark O'Halloran and these kind of people. And it was like, oh, wow, okay, this is the first, big thing. And then not long after that, I ended up getting a tour of Alone It Stands and the second go around of Druid Murphy. Yeah. And it was like 20 weeks work altogether in one. That was started 2013. And that was when I was able to I handed in my notice to the call center I'd worked in for 5 or 6 years. And that was like, okay, give this a crack, like these are amazing jobs to have landed in theatre. So it was really an opportunity to be brave enough to say, I'm a professional actor and this is what I do.
Yeah. That's scary feeling to kind of go cut off the path, to kind of cut off that, jobbing piece and kind of go, right.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you can always go back to something, but I was reading a lot of stuff at the time where it was like, you have to, cut the cord at some stage, because if you have a plan B, you'll always use it and blah, blah, blah. And back in my mind, I always said, well, I could go and be a teacher. I could go and work I'll do anything. But yeah, there was something I thought there was something. Look, I had a couple of jobs back to back to look forward to,
Yeah.
but there was something empowering in saying no. I have to be down to my last shekel before I, go look for something else. And I think there was something in that attitude that a sort of in times where I've been a little bit less busy, it's encouraged me to put on my own work or to produce a play on a small scale somewhere. I'll often ring my agent and say, looking a bit quiet for the start of the year. I might, and that's when I've put on something in Bewley's or gone and done something in the Viking, or places that you can go that are, brilliant venues, but you can put on, small scale show where, you're not going to lose money, and you might be able to make a few quid if you can do well. Or you can certainly cover yourself enough where you're still busy and you're doing some good work, and it's, better than sitting at home doing nothing.
Go back there. I mean, that's kind of, that's a step into seminal times. Dubliners, as I say, Theatre Festival, Gaiety, Corn Exchange, Druid Murphy, and Alona Stands. They're kind of three kind of either seminal companies or seminal works that have kind of happened in the last. And the feeling of kind of doing that, and the feeling of kind of working with Tom Murphy's work, or the feeling of kind of being part of a new Corn Exchange piece, working with James Joyce's work. Like, did that kind of hit home? Kind of what was going on for you?
Yeah, there was like I remember at the start of Dubliners, I think there was, I want to say, eight actors, maybe 10, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, we all walked on at the start, and there was beautiful music, and just the first night in the Gaiety, looking at the audience, all these actors walking out on a massive stage, and in the period costume. That was that was just like, ooh, like, take a deep breath, And likewise with the Druid gig, it was like, the lads had obviously done the show the year before to great acclaim, and I was coming in, I think, in body I was replacing Aaron Monaghan, but then because of ages we switched parts around. So Rory Nolan went to Aaron's original part in Conversations on a Homecoming, and I went into Rory's part because it made sense with the ages that we all were. And I got to do Whistle in the Dark for a week in the Gaiety as well. And we read the plays, and Tom was there, and you clap, you do a read through, and everyone round of applause. And then Gary said it because there was 2 or 3 new members of the cast, maybe 4 of the company, and she was saying, now you guys have just read 2 of the great works of 20th century literature in front of the person who wrote them. And I love Tom Murphy's work, and I believe that statement to be true. But I mean, I had just come from doing an English degree where I'd done a lot of modules on 20th century drama, and I had done the plays of Pinter and Beckett, and I had performed in them in Dramsoc. I'd put them on. I'd been in the Homecoming and Endgame, and written essays about these things. And I was just blown away. That struck me because it was like, wow, it's like sitting next to having your sandwich at lunchtime beside, Beckett or Joyce or Pinter or, Albee or whoever you want, And one time I remember most people had gone out for their lunch, and I was sitting beside Tom at a table, and I couldn't help it. I'd written an essay about Whistle in the Dark and the Homecoming, because people always said that Pinter's play, The Homecoming, was essentially Whistle in the Dark, and Whistle was first. And I asked Tom about it, Pinter always denying that he had seen it, and Tom Murphy said to me, he's convinced that Pinter must have seen it, or because the circle of friends that they all had would have been talking about it, and so on and so forth. And that was just like, that was amazing. That was surreal for me, but I was, and Tom would say, looking forward to seeing the performance. I'm hearing good things, and he was great. He give you little notes. He was only there for the first couple of read-throughs, and then he went. But I'll never forget it. The first night we did Conversations in the Gaiety. We'd already done it in Galway and other places, and I knew Tom was going to be in because this was kind of the official Dublin opening night for it or whatever. And I have the first line of the play where I come in and I look at Garrett Lombard's character, and I look back and I look at him again, and then I say, well, bollocks. But for some reason, I don't know why I did it, my brain just went and just took an extra beat. well, bollocks. And then the rest of the performance went really smoothly, very happy with it. But Tom was like, why did you pause the extra beat? He wouldn't like, and he was right. I was like, I know, Tom, I know. I said, I know. But he was, the way it was a big lesson in how he heard what he had written, I think one time he described it as that he'd written, I'd heard him say he'd written a libretto, it was every comma and it wasn't just to be pedantic or, to be, look, don't ruin my brilliant work.
Yeah.
He was a great singer as well. So his whole thing was hearing it all a certain way, a certain rhythm. And just brilliant,
And so to me then, I mean, in the last 7 years, you've done so much diverse work, both in kind of, on screen and on stage. And maybe just kind of, for me, like ranging from obviously say, Aikino to Class to, Brothers of the Brush to, there's so much kind of in there. And I'm wondering what, and at the same time then kind of, doing kind of TV, from Red Rock to lots of kind of other things. But is there something that you bring to your, I mean, it's not about your process necessarily, but because obviously things are very different depending on what it is. But is it something that you look for in yourself through your work, Stephen? Is it something that kind of, is there a touchstone for you?
Well, I don't know. A few different things like kind of happened that made me think about the stuff I kind of want to do. I mean, I was lucky in that when I did Alone It Stands, and then the year after, I got to do Stones in His Pockets, and went around Ireland, but I went up and down the UK for 3 or 4 months as well. And then Aikino came along, and that was great crack. And again, nerve-wracking just because there was the element of live singing and stuff involved, and it was comedy singing, so I kind of got into the groove of that, but, terrifying. And the Irish football team, including Roy Keane as assistant manager at the time, came along to like the second preview because they were in a camp. They were going to play, I think it was Austria or Switzerland on the Monday. So on the Friday, they were all at the play. Like bizarre to have like Jonathan Walters tweeting, I wonder what the assistant gaffer is going to make of this, and a picture of the stage, And, but it's funny. I met Roy Keane not at that time, but like a few months later at this charity thing, and I asked him what he thought of it, and it was funny. He was like, that was you, and I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, it was very good, yeah. I wasn't sure about your accent, but yeah. But but that was great crack. But it was funny. I hope you won't mind me saying this. I ran into Marco Rowe one night after one of my plays. He came to see it in Lanigan's. He came to see it in Theatre Upstairs, and he was saying, like, because he didn't know each other that well, but he had seen, like, I'd done the Meteor ad, and I'd done these, and he was saying to me, he goes, I know I don't know you too well, but I just thought that you were kind of big comedy, doing voices type of actor.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well, like I never thought about perception, and I do a lot now of like, how we all put each other into a box, whether it be like, perception of each other on social media, and, or you see someone in a certain way, like they do a type of play, oh, you're that type of actor, or you're this type of actor. And I never thought of myself like that. I always thought an actor, you can do anything, whether you're going to be good at it or not, and you will be naturally you're better at some things or whatever. And so that was important, because then when I was going to figure out what I wanted to do in my own work, part of it was about what I wanted to do as an actor, as well as getting back into writing, because I hadn't written for years, but yeah, but stuff more recently, just getting to kind of play stuff like Class or Brothers of the Brush or Hue and Cry, even Last Orders in the Dockside recently, just these kind of vulnerable men who sort of have a much tougher facade or outer, and delving into that, you hear a lot these days about masculinity and crisis and toxic masculinity and all that, and that's certainly valid. But I think that those characters, the positive side of masculinity as well as the harmful side, and the cycles of that. I think men are trying to break now, where they understand what the strengths and weaknesses of how we've been conditioned over the years, over the generations, how to break that. And I think that I've been looking at that. I've been sort of getting into that and exploring kind of working class Dublin characters and what that actually means. I mean, I remember going on Panty's podcast talking about class, and the topic was room at the table. Who gets to have a room at the table? And I was in an incredibly privileged position compared to some of the stories. We had a guy who was a photographer who'd been in direct provision, and just stuff like that. And I was like, God, if you have decent drinking water, if you have a roof over your head, you're privileged in my book. But I remember Panty asked me what are working class values, because we were talking about the play class, and I remember it was hard to articulate, what it was. But so I've kind of been lucky in the last few years to be exploring that with characters, particularly in the play class, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting, because there's a few things there. I mean, I think the perception thing, that's a really interesting thing that, Mark not just said about you necessarily, but just about the way you kind of said about the way you kind of pigeonhole people, both in the cultural industry, but also online and in life. But then, when you're going to plays like Class, there can be reactionary against that kind of, in order to give people a voice, re-pigeonholes them again into those kind of genres, like, you're a working class person, or you're this and this. And I think Class in particular, and your character, which is so beautifully written, and beautifully portrayed. I mean, the nuances in that performance were extraordinary. But and a very, very vulnerable space, because that man in that play finds himself, where he has to speak from his core rather than from his armor.
And it was funny, like, my girlfriend and other friends were like, I've done the play a few times now, we've been lucky that it's come back and gone to different countries, but point out to me that when you do that play, your personality changes. And I never thought of, you get into the character whole thing is fine, but the idea that you don't shake it off, I never really had that for cling on to me for so long. And I realized then it was true. I would find myself being a lot more irritable and angry, and it was something that we were talking about in Irish Theatre Institute, the idea that we never talk about, you do a certain part, and does the company need to pay for some counselling after it, but that part was particularly special. I was involved early on, and workshops with Dave Horan and Isla Golden, who wrote it and directed it. And I just saw a lot of my own dad in that character, and my dad's quite a remarkable man. He's a butcher by trade and still works as a butcher, but he's also a qualified psychotherapist.
Wow.
And he's done a lot of work with individual clients, but also with youth groups in, quote unquote disadvantaged areas. Strong Dublin macho working class guy, but very at that, as a younger man, he's an alcoholic but hasn't drank in 25 years, and he's very open, so he wouldn't mind me saying this. But it took him into his mid to late 30s to get in touch with, who he was, and his feminine side as well as his masculine side, and he's very intelligent and great sensitivity towards people. But when I looked at that play Class, in a jokey way, I was saying, like, even the voice, I was going, that was my dad when he was 30, because that character Brian, let's say, was 30, and at the time my dad, when he was 30, I would have been 9, and he would have had another son who was 6, and that's exactly Brian's scenario in this. Now, him and my mum are together, but I could just relate to that, the inability to articulate how you feel, or to feel like your ideas you can't say it, or and that's it. It was so inside, and the idea of shouting and being told stop shouting, and it's like, I'm not shouting. He doesn't even realize he's shouting, and that's what was brilliant about the play. It was that you got this guy who you saw a real person, you liked him, you understood his points, but he just kept sabotaging himself because he couldn't articulate what he wanted to say, because it was either he didn't have the vocabulary, he didn't have the language, he didn't have the emotional language to express himself. And I think and one of the really brilliant things of the play was in the writing is that Brian only ever mentions, because it's about his story is about father and son. I play the father and the son, but he only ever mentions his father once, and it's in towards the end where he's quite emotional. He's saying, how my dad used to make me feel, and that's the only time it's ever mentioned. And just that cycle and how to break it and how to be brave enough to break it. And yeah, I think it just brought up a lot in me.
Yeah.
And also that's the thing, is that it's not even about showing a vulnerable side, which I think I've sometimes struggled with over the years in my own personal life. But I think it was showing the ugly side of yourself or a character, and that they can still be accepted after the fact. And I think that's why I found it so enjoyable, but also quite difficult to really deal with, because it was bringing out something I recognised.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of, I think it's the part of the piece that was kind of dealt with them as human beings rather than where they were from or what accent they spoke with or what they were trying to do. It's kind of flaws and all. And I think that was, that was the beauty of it. And I suppose for me chatting to you here now, I mean, there's kind of, we'll talk about your writing in a second, but also, I mean, was that the first time you were in the Abbey doing that, or were you in, was that your Abbey debut doing class in there? Or had you been there before that?
Yes, I did. I did class in the Peacock, and then in the summer, that was the start of 2018. I did, or 2017, I can't remember now. And then I did Ulysses on the main stage in the summer, which was the first time on the main stage in the Abbey.
Yeah. I mean, from that trajectory, I mean, I suppose it's interesting, like, chatting back to you, your huge love of soccer and football continuing and getting, I can imagine the bizarreness of, the Irish football team around Aikino. And then that sense of, the Abbey, your national stage has been this, not unattainable, but something that was future on, and suddenly you're in the Gaiety a few times, Druid, and now you're in the Abbey. And then I suppose reflecting back on that, then your drive to write again, or not write again, but to kind of go, right, fuck it, I have plays here that I want to talk about. How did that come about for you?
I was living in a house on Ormond Quay, a kind of a big 4-story building, and it was kind of a notorious actor's house back in the day. But when I moved in and kind of settled down a bit, and there was like 7 or 8 people lived there, nice big rooms, like, I think they might have filmed the pilot for Bachelor's Walk in that house. But anyway, Carl Shields was one of the people living there, and I'd known Carl at this stage for years, and big fan of him as an actor and director, and what he was doing with Theatre Upstairs, and I'd met him a few times over the years, in your first time going into the Flowing Tide and seeing, him and Liam Carney and all their actors out the back, and trying to go up and talk to them, and and but anyway, we were living together, and over the years, so many times, you used to do a bit of writing, didn't you? I said, yeah, and because I told him about the Druid debut, and how I joked about if him and Liam Carney had been 20 years younger, they could have played the parts, and what do you mean 20 years, and so anyway, we talking ideas, and whether it be over a coffee or a pint, or just sitting at home in the house, we pass each other in the kitchen and we be chatting and what's going on. And he was at me for years to write something for Theatre Upstairs. And then one time, I think it was probably the summer 2015, we were chatting away, and I said, I have this idea for me and Shauna Kerslake, and it's 2 people, and it's sort of like set in what looks like the bathroom in Ormond Quay, this old wooden floors and old school, old bath. And he was like, yeah, I'll tell you what, do you want a date? I said, what do you mean? He said, I'll give you 2 weeks November, we'll pencil it in. And I said, right, go on. And that was it. And he said, that's it, you're in, you're putting something up because I penciled you in. I'm giving my theatre, I have you down. So anyway, long story short, I ended up finishing the play, and that was From Eden, and we read it for Carl and Laura Honan, and they liked it, and I wanted, and Shauna wanted Carl to direct it, and he was delighted that we wanted him to do it, and he got a great team in. Katie Davenport was just out of the Lear and did an amazing set, with no money, and Owen Stapleton was doing the lights, and Derek Conaghy over at the Abbey did the sound, and it was just like, it was just putting it on. I remember and for me, it was coming off doing the back of all these big comedies to be a character that I had written that was much more introvert as a character, that was one voice, one character. But the other thing was, going back to the class thing, is that what I'm interested in, even though if it's something about class and it's talking about society, that's fine. But my character was from where I'm from, spoke like I speak, and yet was, a university graduate who was talking about books and was a bit of a grammar geek. Like, so I was kind of interested in that as well, and that the characters can be work class, and it's never mentioned where they're from. They just are. That where they're from doesn't have to be the thing, But yeah, the first night doing that in Theatre Upstairs, terrifying. I hadn't put on a play in years. Because you're so bold and brave when you're in college. You just lash something on a page and throw it up. With this, you're getting reviewed by national papers, and your precious reputation and all that. And two people just talking in the bathroom, and talking about mad stuff like religion and going off to a cult and all this kind of stuff, and emotional stuff. And I don't think people are going to buy this. Nothing mad happens. No one bursts in. But the response to it was great, and it gave me great confidence. And more importantly, it was just something that we had created, and we went on and done a second one then, Northern Lights, a few years later. Same team, basically a few new people on the crew, but just it's easy to romanticize what Carl did now that because he passed away, but what Theatre Upstairs was just unbelievable. But Carl himself, as a creative person, as a person, he was so generous and so big-hearted. Me and Sean, when we talk about it, we see pictures, we find it hard to keep it together sometimes, because when the three of us were just there, whether it was rehearsing in the house we lived in, or in Theatre Upstairs, or in the back of the Lanigan's, the side bar that wasn't open, just the conversations, Carl's ability to work with actors, and everything he said was just like these little nuggets of just beautiful stuff about how people interact, and the pauses and the silences and those little moments, and just how every little inch of your body and how we do the design and how it sounds. Every picture that we show the audience is telling them something every second of the play, and he just had a great way of expressing it. And they were just special times, rehearsal rooms are special anyway, but when it's just the three and you're doing it out of the pure passion of it, no one's paying you as such, and you're just there doing it, and it's your own work. And if somebody who's able to bring out stuff in your material you didn't even know was there, like digging into your subconscious, and being able to do it in a way that was sensitive and was helpful, and they were just amazing times. And Shauna feels the same way. We were just privileged, we knew that it was going to be special, even if no one else thought it was special. We were doing something we really believed in, and maybe you don't appreciate it enough at the time, but it's hard to when you're in the middle of it. But even then, that's one of the occasions, like even doing Northern Lights a couple of years ago, and Carl was struggling with his leg and stuff, but he was still just his insight was invaluable. Yeah.
And come here, a couple of things there. It goes beyond saying that, from the man, excuse me, as an actor, as a director outside Theatre Upstairs, but then that kind of alchemy of himself and Laura, and kind of all the people that kind of were brought through that place, to, the legacy of that work will go on for generations. And I think there's a lot of discussions about how to sustain kind of work at the moment. But interested in, Stephen, your ability then to step back from your own work and become the actor. Is that a hard thing to do when you're kind of written to yourself?
I would have struggled early on with the two plays in rehearsal to be comfortable to let it kind of go, not of the work, but let go internally, not be kind of watching myself from the outside with the writer's hat on. But I think because of working with Carl and Shauna, it was pretty quick. Carl would pull me up pretty quickly when I was acting, and it was able to be let go. But it was easier in Northern Lights after doing From Eden, I think. but it's not necessarily something that I'll always do, write for myself.
Yeah.
These were just two particular stories with particular people that that I wanted to do and thought that I would be able to do well, and was something different for me. And because they were challenging and because they were hard, you resist it for the first while, and then it's just a little note, or it's one particular day in rehearsal, maybe an hour in rehearsal, where you make a little breakthrough, and then the floodgates kind of are open. And Carl was very good with that as well, with emotion, in that, recognizing what we all know as actors, that it's going to be different every night anyway, regardless. But just when it's there, let it go, and when it's not, don't force it. And he was, he was just great. Knew when to push, knew when to pull, knew when to hug, and knew when to give you a kick up the hole.
Brilliantly put. Come here. Yeah. Around the same time, then you're kind of, you're on Red Rock, and kind of, a character that kind of hit the cultural zeitgeist for a while there too. I mean, that must have been very interesting for you, around.
Yeah. Like the usual story for kind of your quote unquote character actor, and doing like little bits and bobs in a day here and a day there. Went in to audition for Red Rock for a couple of different parts, and ended up getting this one. And it was meant to be 2 or 3 days. Did my filming, showed up on TV for 2 or 3 days, and then went away. And then it was like the following season, phone call to say, look, they need a new bad guy basically, and this character, he's been introduced, so why not make him into a bit of a main character for a little stint. So that was great. It meant loads of time in front of the camera, lots of practice.
Yeah.
Being comfortable with, being on screen. And when you go, I went onto a big American production just for one day, for one scene with a lead actor. But having months of experience on Red Rock, it's like you can walk in, you know what everyone else is doing, you feel confident, you know where your marks are, you know how the camera works, you know where to pitch it. You're not as nervous as you would have been. So that was great. Red Rock, met great people, and yeah, it was like the first time I was like, I could, I used Twitter, so I was like Monday nights talking to people who were big fans of Red Rock, and just little silly things that you either embrace or you don't, and at that particular time I was embracing it, and I just thought it was a lot of fun, and would have been nice to keep going, but then at the same time I look back and I think the character was kind of killed off at the right time. He was kind of a popular kind of villain on TV for Irish telly, and it was the start of an episode. It was a bit of a shock, and Red Rock was great. It's a pity it couldn't keep going, but look, it gave a lot of people who hadn't been on screen before a lot of kind of decent roles, and yeah, so Louise Kiley casting, she did a great job. She, got a lot of people in a lot of stage actors who hadn't done a lot of screen in years, and a lot of people that you wouldn't necessarily know from around, ended up on it and kind of doing some good work. And I think it got a lot better as it went on. I mean, for my character, it was quite good because they had just pushed the it back into an hour as a TV hour as opposed to half hours, and they pushed it later, so it was past the watershed. So there's stuff that my character could do that was a little bit more edgy, and so it made it work a little bit better for my character. Yeah.
And seeing radio as well, because you recorded both Northern Lights and did you?
From Eden, yeah.
Yeah, but they both recorded for radio.
Yeah, both for RTE Drama on one. And again, usual thing. I went in to do a voice on a radio drama in there, and just got on well with the director Grady Slavin and the producer Kevin Reynolds, and then they were keeping track on what I was up to, and they came to see the plays, thought they'd work for radio, so got us in to do them, and they've both been aired several times. And radio plays are great, actually, because we're all listening to podcasts these days, and we're all used to that medium. So although my plays weren't specifically written for radio, little tweaks here and there, they're really just two people talking and naturalistic conversation, so they're quite easy to listen to, and you get a good sense of the story. I mean, I think when you write theatre, you want people to be able to see it as well, but these particular plays, I thought they worked quite well. I thought they were faithful enough to the plays, and Goretti directed the radio version of From Eden, but they actually got Carl in to direct the radio version of Northern Lights, and it's it was only a couple of months before he passed away, and it's funny. There's a bit that doesn't happen in the play, but we needed to wrap it up quicker. So we had this delivery character, and it's just Carl's voice, and he just goes, the character's name, yeah, sign here, chief, and then he was like, Slán, and it was just this. I listened to it back, forgetting that we had that in, and that he just put the little Slán in, and I just was a mess, I couldn't handle it. But it was that was. I know he's really. Because I know Carl was proud of all the stuff that happened in Theatre Upstairs, but I know that was the last show that was on in Theatre Upstairs was Northern Lights, and I know he was really proud of getting to direct the radio play.
Great. Well, come here. I won't keep much longer. I just wanted to ask you about kind of going forward. I mean, you're just a successful actor. Doing a lot of really, really interesting work, and you've had two, a few great plays, and kind of two of them have kind of particularly kind of taken off. Is that something that's twin track for you now, Stephen? Is there kind of is the writing kind of something you want to bring along with you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I always thought that at some point, if I was to be able to sustain a career in this, that it would be the writing, that kind of writing something that I could be in, that somehow someone sees and it gives it a launch pad to somewhere else. And it goes back to that thing of perception or luck or right time, right place, and that there's a million people of equal ability, but we're in a subjective business. It's not, you're Roger Federer, you win Wimbledon, you're the best tennis player. It's people's opinion. It's right time, right place, as well as talent. So the writing at the moment, I'm writing something that I'm hoping is going to be, made into TV. And yeah, I have a few other little theatre projects going on. But yeah, there's a part of me that wants to have a great 5-year, 10-year plan. And there's another part of me that goes, well, better just get through this lockdown now,
There is that, yeah.
I've lost a few jobs, and they'll come back, But it's also a time to kind of reflect on, the hustle and bustle. You can fall into the trap. I mean, a friend of mine was doing the same as me and was getting on okay, and gave up acting a couple of years ago. And ran into him at Christmas. How you getting on? Just realised that he was living what he thought, he had to, the life he had to live because of his group of friends, and he just fell out of love with it. And I think that, I'm not saying that's happening to me, but it's just a time to reflect on, I've been on quite a focused kind of track in one sense of trying to just hustle and bustle and get on and survive and, live in this career. And this is now, it may be a time to use, if you can use it in a positive way, to kind of think, what is it I want to do? What had made me happy? What work? If I had to look at the whole spectrum of stuff that I've done, what type of stuff do I want to do moving forward? And sometimes you don't think about that. Sometimes you just go, God, what's the next job? And it's a bonus if it's really interesting, or it's something new, like a class or Maz and Bricks, or it's your own work or whatever it may be. And my two plays are scheduled to be on in the Abbey and the Peacock in the Abbey in November. Who knows whether they're going to go ahead at this stage? Don't know. Hoping they do, but yeah, I'm just going to be trying to combine the two. To answer your question, yeah, I'll be trying to combine writing and acting, and hopefully, branching out as well, different mediums, not just theatre. I think I'll always come back to theatre, but if I can sort of, this particular project I'm working on, if I can get it off the ground, it's in the early stages of development, but if we can get it going, it'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. It's worth saying, in case someone finds us on the depths of the internet in 10 years' time, that we're kind of speaking in the midst of a kind of quasi lockdown in the middle of a COVID-19. So God knows, someone could be looking at this in 10 years going, yeah, well, that, you're all still in lockdown. But I think that sense of, you're right, it's a good space to be in, but it's also kind of a space where, you're kind of forced to think as well, which kind of is challenging when you can't action then immediately what you want to do. And I think particularly for people who are working in the independent sector, that's hard, because, we're all facing an unknown future. But I think it's a kind of it's a twin track of a hugely chance to innovate, but then also a huge chance to stare down a barrel of a gun as well. So you're kind of,
yeah, and it's difficult, because at the best of times we go from one end to the other. We're either really desperately insecure, or else we're like egomaniacs. So it's important that you try and focus on yourself and what you're going to do. And it's not, I'm not, you know, I'm talking to myself more than anyone here. Like, you know, that thing of going, you can see during this time when you might have lost jobs, and then there's other stuff that's going on, and that's doing well. It's not to fall into the trap of looking over your garden fence and going, oh, I wish I had what he or she had, you know. So yeah, just trying to keep yourself sane and focus on what you actually want to do, as opposed to what you think success is, or, you know, yeah. So it's just that trying to focus on your own.
Yeah, I think it's a great lesson for life, in that not focusing on what other people are doing, because it's the hardest thing to do. But once you get it, it kind of becomes a habit. Listen, Stephen, thanks so much for taking part in this, and eventually, I'm hoping to God that when I sign off on this, that I don't have to send you another email. But I think we're all good.
Hopefully, yeah. Well, thanks a million, Mark. I enjoyed it.
All right, cheers.
All right.